Correct.
Good.
So, Rabbi, how's your trip? Are you going to Israel?
They're locked down. Israel's locked down.
Especially made little labels just for that.
How much will they cost?
They're basically a wrapper and then just put a wrap around there. So,
but Kenny, you're not funny.
yes.
Lorraine, I didn't reach Fortunate, but I sent you this Zoom link.
Okay, they must be out running, doing things. Thanks for trying.
You're welcome.
Hi, Reva.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Doing okay.
Good.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And happy
Sorry
New
we had to
Year.
cancel lunch, but hopefully we'll reschedule it sometime whenever.
Waiting for the rabbi to come back.
Everybody.
Now, if any of you are interested, somebody who has been very dear to a lot of people from the American Association of University Women, passed away and without family. So they're having an estate sale next Wednesday and Thursday. She was a marvelous entertainer. She could have 40 or 50 people in her house, and
Wow.
she had beautiful, like the French provincial, and beautiful, beautiful things. So if anybody is interested, I'll give you the address. It's
Okay,
all
I'd like to.
estate.
It's also Ralph Meldon's funeral this afternoon, if you've got an email about that. And he has been a long time, he and Shirley, members of the congregation.
It was yesterday.
I thought
Yeah,
the
I
funeral
got it
was
yesterday.
today. They said he died yesterday and the funeral was today, no?
No,
Marcia,
the notice
funeral
came
was
yesterday.
Oh, okay, good. I'm glad I didn't go down there then. Okay. Nah, I'm glad I didn't go down today. All right. What kind of turnout did they have?
Just the
Rabbi?
family.
Okay. That's sweet.
It was at Mount Sinai Cemetery,
Oh, was
which
it
is
Sinai?
North
Oh.
Phoenix.
All right. Yeah, I
And,
know where that is.
A very sweet family.
Yes, and they're lovely people. I'm gonna find my tour. There it is. Okay.
Rabbi, are you going away?
No, doesn't look like it. The trip to Israel was canceled about 2 days ago. The good news is that I after a little bit of discussions with Delta, they agreed to refund my money rather than give me a 1-year credit. And so Delta was extremely helpful. And, you know, in all my years of flying with them, I've never had a bad experience. So I was very pleased to see.
So are you going to go to Jamaica or you're staying here?
It doesn't look, I'm still investigating other options, primarily Jamaica, but doesn't look like it. The flight to Jamaica goes with JetBlue mostly, and JetBlue's already announced that they're canceling thousands and thousands of flights over the next 3 weeks. So it doesn't seem like that's likely, but I'll let you know. And I carry my cell phone with me wherever I go. So if next week I log in and I say I'm in Timbuktu.
That's Africa, by the way, Timbuktu.
Yes, I know. I've never been to Timbuktu. It's East Africa.
There was a book. There was a book about the librarian from Timbuktu.
Yeah. I'm not surprised, though, that Delta gave you a full refund. No one wants to mess with a rabbi. You know.
Oh, that's not true. There's always one in every congregation that wants to mess with the rabbi. I'm not joking. I wish I was joking.
Well,
Okay, good morning, Steve. And
good morning, everyone,
so
and happy New
over to
Year
you
to
to
you
start.
all. Let us begin with the Torah Blessing. I just want to remind everyone to be respectful of everyone's comments and concerns. And also, if you are not speaking, please mute yourselves. Thank you very much. Let us begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher shanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the world, who has sanctified us with the
teaching of Torah.
commanded us to engage in the words of Torah. Amen. Okay, Rabbi, let's
okay, today is Parshat Bo, which you can find on page 27 in your handouts, which is from Harvey Fields' Torah Commentary for Our Time. And this is, as you know, we have in Harvey Fields, we've got either at least 2 and sometimes up to 4 or 5 different topics. And each week there's a question or there's a theme. And some of those themes are more psychological. Some of them are more literary. Some of them are more cultural and so forth. Today's a very practical question. Were the Israelites justified in taking gold and silver from
Rabbi,
the Egyptians?
I need to stop for a second. B, you are locked in twice.
Yeah, I noticed. I'm getting out.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah, I got out of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Rabbi. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. We're going to all go on a field trip to MIT to learn how to use Zoom, and thank you. The question today is, were the Israelites justified in taking gold and silver from the Egyptians? And on the face of it, this seems to be a rather bizarre question. I mean, you can't just take stuff from people, or can you? You know, if you've been slaves for a long time and slaves don't get paid, then now that you're getting out and that under politically auspicious circumstances, meaning the 10 plagues have battered the Egyptians into submission, then you're in a pretty good negotiating position to say, I want 240 years worth of back pay and benefits. Don't forget the benefits. So, okay, that was a joke. Don't laugh, don't laugh. Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you, B. All right. So, so this is the question. There's also the question of what are the Israelites going to do with this gold and silver? You may have some sense in your mind that maybe it's not good for former slaves to be wandering around the desert with a lot of loose gold and silver. You know, they might blow it at a casino or worse. So those are just a couple of my opening comments. Is there any brief thoughts or questions as we about this broad theme? Good morning, Rochelle.
Yeah, don't get angry at me, but I'm sorry you're not in Israel. That's kind of the broad theme.
Yes, well, I'm going to set one of those backgrounds with the Western Wall behind me, you know, that, and so I'll say I'm coming to you from the Western Wall. But thank you for your sentiments and thank you all for your kind thoughts. And any other opening comments about taking the Egyptian stuff? Bill, you're smiling.
Well, it can be viewed as reparations. We see something very similar now with the Black movement and reparations to them for slavery. So there are a lot of parallels there. That might be one way of justifying what the Hebrews did at that time.
When I was in Jamaica, we were trying to get as much publicity for the synagogue as possible. And we got onto a Rastafarian, had a very popular radio talk show. And so I get on there and I studied all the similarities between Rastafarianism and Judaism and different symbols and stuff. And he focused really heavily on this concept of reparations. He said, you got reparations from the Germans. How can we Jamaicans get reparations from the British? And he came back to it over and over and over and over, a question that I had not prepared for. And I didn't really want to give an answer to, because it wasn't, something I, had done serious study in or any study in. But it was interesting that on his mind, that was something of very great importance. And I'm sure if we had gotten into it more, that he would have drawn this biblical precedent. Marcia.
I'm a little bit tired today, so if I sound out of it, if one is to accept ethically, the reparations should be given, not taken. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you take something, that's stealing, that comes down to it. If reparations were offered, that's a different story, But I don't think it was really, it's justification, I understand, but I don't think it's appropriate, okay?
Okay, so it's up to the people who've done the bad stuff to voluntarily offer reparations. Now, the reason the Germans offered reparations was the German government that offered reparations was completely different people and ideology than the people that had done the bad things in the first place, right? If the Nazis had been defeated but not destroyed, and there was some Nazi Germany that continued, even within smaller borders, you would never get those Nazis to voluntarily give any reparations because they were proud of what they did. And they didn't want to reward the people that they were trying to hurt. So reparations may involve getting a different government, a completely different government that wants to make up for the bad things done by their, ideological foes. Okay, any other comments, Minya or Rochelle?
I'm just thinking, look at it from a whole different perspective. These people were in that land for a few hundred years. Maybe they had friends. Maybe they had people who did actually support them. The Egyptian people were just as enslaved as the Hebrew people were, from what I understand. So perhaps they had friends and they actually handed a lot of this stuff over to them so that they could leave and be free. And you have evidence of this. Who saved Moses? Who saved Moses?
The princess.
Yeah, an Egyptian the princess.
Not just an Egyptian, but the daughter of the Pharaoh, right? So, and she must have known who he was. There's not a lot of babies just floating in the Nile, just randomly, out cruising on a Tuesday morning and saying, gaga goo goo, I want to see the pyramids. I mean, it was clear, that this was an Israelite baby. It was very, very clear. Yes, Sai.
If you read a history of the Civil War, you find that the troops, the black troops that fought for the North, really took advantage of any battles. They took advantage of the Southerners in any battle that they had won. And they destroyed a lot of Southern buildings and took valuables from any of the Southerners that they came across. which was normal revenge. And I think in the case of the Hebrews, they did the same thing. They took whatever they could grab before they left.
All right. Well, okay, we're ready to start. We're on page 27. Welcome to Ellen, who was at a dentist appointment. I hope that it didn't go too badly and that you're not in too much pain and you don't have a tooth half falling out of your mouth. And we're doing the question of were the Israelites justified in taking stuff out of Egypt with them, and what are the circumstances of that? Okay, who'd like to read page 27, left-hand column? Okay, Minya. Good morning, Minya.
Good morning. I just want to ask a question on what you just said. Did the Israels take this gold and silver, or was it given to them?
Okay, well, that's what we're going to read over the next few minutes, right? So, but I guess we want to pay attention to that. You know, did the Israelites seize it, or was it given, right? So that's the question we want to explore in the next few minutes. I think Rochelle said it made a big difference, or was that Rochelle that said that, or was that Marcia that said that?
Marcia.
So Marcia said that, you know, so it does make a big difference, and the circumstances also make a difference. Was it one group of Egyptians that took some other Egyptians and gave the other Egyptian stuff to the Israelites, which Rochelle kind of may have been suggesting, or was it the Egyptians that have the stuff that gave it directly to the Israelites? And does that matter? Reparations are reparations, or are they? Okay, Minya, page 27 for left-hand column.
Were the Israelites justified in taking gold and silver from the Egyptians? Just before the 10th and final plague is brought upon Pharaoh and the Egyptians, Moses is commanded by God to tell the Israelites, quote, to borrow, each man from his neighbor and each woman from hers, objects of silver and gold, unquote. The Torah informs us that the Egyptians willingly gave the Israelites what they requested, and that thus they stripped the Egyptians. The description raises many troubling questions. Does the Torah justify robbery from the Egyptians? Why were the Egyptians willing to hand over their wealth to the Israelites? Did the Israelites take advantage of the Egyptians when they stripped them of their gold and silver? The Hebrew word for borrow is sha'el. It can also mean ask or demand. Which is the most accurate translation for this incident? Did the Israelites borrow, ask for, or demand riches from the Egyptians? Were the gold and silver gifts, or were they spoils of victory? Among all Jewish interpreters of this significant Torah study, none suggests that the Israelites deliberately set out to rob the Egyptians of their wealth. Nearly all are agreed that the Egyptians willingly presented their gold and silver to the departing Israelites.
Okay, stop there.
Okay.
Comments or questions? Pam.
You know, after, you know, the plagues and everything, there's possibly the Egyptians wanted to just give them the gold and silver just to get them out of town before there's any more plagues.
Right. The firstborn died.
Yeah.
So if it was me, I'd do, you know, if we could pay someone off to get rid of COVID, I think we would do it very quickly, right? So is that your working assumption, Pam, that the Egyptians gave voluntarily to get rid of them?
Yes, I'm on that thought process.
Okay. Sai?
I don't believe that they wanted them to get out of town, because again, once they're out of town, the Egyptians are going to end up doing all the work. And they were smart enough to know that they let the slaves go, they would end up doing that. So why be happy about letting them go?
Well, there could be other groups of slaves, right? If you've got one group of slaves causing so much trouble, best solution is not to abolish slavery, but to substitute one group of slaves for another. That was done in North America for a variety of reasons, right? So this, and I think at the time they had multiple different types of slaves, different groups, you know, because somebody built the pyramids and it wasn't the Israelites, and I don't think it was the Egyptians themselves. So I would think that there were other slaves. Now, you know, would it be easy to get so many other slaves? I don't know. I mean,
well, I don't believe that God would specify the Jews as the only slaves. I mean, he's got a good heart. Why would he only let the Jews free and let the others still be slaves?
Ah, okay. And that comes back to that same question, is God all good? If God is all good, that wouldn't make sense for God to go to so much trouble to free the Israelites from slavery and then just have their places taken by some other group that weren't slaves before. I mean, that would be really bad. In Jewish law, in the Talmud, there's many discussions. If somebody's kidnapped, for example, and you can, let's say, free that person by paying a little bit of money or something, knowing that the kidnappers are just going to go kidnap someone in Glendale or Scottsdale or Flagstaff or wherever, can you do that? Because you're ending up putting somebody else in the exact same situation that you don't want yourself or your friend to be in. So you've got to somehow eradicate evil, not just stay away from it so that the evil hurts somebody else, right? That is being a complicit bystander almost. Okay, comments, Babette. Yes, Riva.
Yeah, I have a lot of trouble with the choice of the word borrow. I know a Hebrew words can have multiple meanings, but if in fact the word is borrow, that's just lying, you know, and I have a lot of trouble with that. So in particular, I find that very troubling. The second point is Bill mentioned earlier about the situation, reparations for Blacks. We've also cheated Indians to an extraordinary degree, Native Americans to an extraordinary degree in this country. And I haven't heard about reparations, but just even fairness has been just a terrible situation with them. They've been ripped off, you know, so many ways and treated dishonestly so many times. It's just tragic, and it's still current.
And so is the situation we're describing here in some ways applicable to the Native Americans and the situation with them?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of the issues that are brought up in here, one of the wonderful qualities about them is that in so many ways, the core issues are really universal and current.
Could you be more specific?
Well, the issue of one generation being particularly mistreated by people, you know, other people of previous generations. How does the current generation cope with, in some way, correcting that?
Mm-hmm.
Just a point of information. I heard on the radio this morning that the Canadian government was giving, I don't recall the exact figure, but it was like tens of billions of dollars to the Indian Children Agency for past harm that had been done to the Indian children.
Yeah, I read that too. There's still Indian homes in this state where they don't even have an indoor toilet.
Okay, Ellen and then Rochelle.
I have a logistical question. Were they carrying like coins or jewelry or candelabras, and like what was it they were taking that was gold and
That's
silver?
another good question. I prefer not to give a specific answer to that, but rather to ask you to think about that as we go through it. But Ellen, what does your logic tell you about what form this gold and silver was in? Do you think it was gold bars?
No.
Rolexes.
But they were like on their way out and they didn't have a lot of, but they had enough to make that golden calf later. So I guess.
Oh, there you go. Okay. So this is I made a veiled reference to this at the beginning, right? Did people pick up on that? That I said maybe it's not good to have people who are just slaves wandering around with all this gold and silver in the desert. They might go blow it all at a casino, which was a joke. What I was making a veiled reference to is maybe they wouldn't blow it at a casino. Maybe they would do something even stupider and build a golden calf with it. Yep. So apparently it was in all sorts of piecemeal items. And then under the leadership of none other than Moses' translator and putative brother, Aaron, it all gets melted down and made into one nice piece of work, which is a sarcastic thing. Rochelle.
I'm thinking of this also in another aspect, knowing at least myself and a few other people. What if they persuaded the people to give it to them? Like said, hey, our God's going to bring us out of Egypt and take us to this promised land. If you give us this jewelry and stuff, our God will remember you and do the same for you.
Okay.
They could have like swazied their way through this as well.
Right. So what do you think? Marcia, do you think that seems practical, that might have been how it worked?
I think we were all making excuses for them for taking this jewelry.
Babette?
And it was probably jewelry because that's the most easily transported. And the women seem to have had the earrings at the incident of the golden calf and such.
And that's what people have, in their houses. They don't have, so much gold statues as much as a lot of jewelry and stuff like that. Babette, and then Riva, and then Lorraine, and then...
Okay, I think there is no compensation for enslaving people for generation after generation. And when the easiest, one of the easiest is there was slavery in America. Yes. My parents weren't owners of plantations, or my grandparents. They weren't even in the United States. They were fleeing Europe. Right? I'm not responsible.
Ah, okay.
That's what I was going to ask.
Okay. So who's responsible? So the daughter of Pharaoh was obviously a good woman. She saved Moses from almost certain death. Was she nevertheless responsible? To what degree is there group responsibility, collective responsibility? Okay, we'll come back to that question.
But I have something else. I have something else to say also, as far as the Holocaust is concerned. There is no reparations. You can't give back the generations and patrimony that was lost. And I did a little research. I'm sorry, I can't quote where it came from. But I read that the German government did give a lot of money to help in the formation of Israel. That's a different compensation than forcing them to return the artwork and things they looted.
Right.
So what is compensation?
Right. And what is the word compensation mean, and how would it relate to various crimes? If I steal something from you, I can return it. if I kill someone, I can't return the life, and therefore there may be things I can do to partially compensate, but you can't fix the situation. Riva, and then Lorraine, and then whoever else would like to put up their hands.
I think all the commentary suggesting that, you know, that the Jews did not steal from the Egyptians. One question I have regarding that point of view, or that comment, is that, well, why then, if the Egyptians gave the Jews willingly their wealth, why did they chase them into the Red Sea or the Reed Sea?
Mm-hmm. That seems to indicate that they weren't so happy with the Israelites leaving. Now, it could be that they changed their mind, that they had agreed originally. But okay, Lorraine and then Pam.
Lorraine, you have to unmute.
Okay, Pam and then Lorraine.
I think we read somewhere that it was a sense of the Pharaoh changing his mind, where the Pharaoh said they could go, and then the Pharaoh changed his mind and said, you can't go. And then went anyway, and then he chased them down. So I think that, but I still get back that in order to give away that silver and gold, they needed a really good reason, and not having any more plagues, to me, would be the good reason.
Okay. Now, Lorraine, are you on mute now?
I am.
Okay.
I think it was jewelry. As a woman, jewelry is very portable, has a lot of value. I don't think you can pay back for what was done to any group of people when they're hurt by an oppressor. And basically, that's my feeling.
Okay. Let me read you the section. This is from the Jewish Study Bible that I've made reference to before. This is chapter 12 in the book of Exodus, beginning in verse 33 or 31. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron in the night and said, "Up, depart from among my people, you and the Israelites with you. Go worship God as you said. Take also your flocks and your herds as you said, and be gone. And may you bring a blessing upon me also." The Egyptians urged the people on, impatient to have them leave the country, for they said, "We shall all be dead if the Israelites stay very much longer." So the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading bowls wrapped in their cloaks upon their shoulders, right? And this is a reference to which holiday?
Passover.
Okay, and we welcome Bernie and Nan and Dee. And the Israelites had done Moses' bidding, and they borrowed from the Egyptians objects of silver and gold and clothing. And Adonai had disposed the Egyptians favorably toward the people, and they let them have their requests. Thus, they stripped the Egyptians. Just to give you, this is what the Torah says. This is the translation of the New Jewish Publication Society. And as we've said multiple times, everything is in the translation, right? So, but that at least is one translation. Okay, any other comments? And if not, then back to, well, Minya is on break. So who would like to read? Okay, Pam.
Okay, just remind me where we are here.
Very bottom of the page, left column, Rabbi Ishmael.
Okay. Rabbi Ishmael says that the response on the part of the Egyptians was immediate and without qualification. Rabbi Jose agrees, explaining that there was a high level of trust and respect between the Egyptian people and the Israelites. For 3 days, the Egyptians were living in a plague of black darkness, while the Israelites had light in their dwellings. The Israelites could have taken advantage of them and robbed them, but they did not. For that reason, Rabbi Jose maintains the Egyptians trusted the Israelites and graciously rewarded them with silver and gold.
All right, what do you think? You put your neighbor in darkness for long enough, you don't steal his stuff, then they'll let you take it. Riva, is that a hand?
Yeah, low credibility on that one.
Anyway, I'm on Team Jose.
Bubba-misis. They could have killed them, right? If they went to rob the Egyptians. They had weapons.
Yeah.
Well, I guess a kitchen knife is a weapon, right? You don't, if you're going to kill your neighbor, you just take a kitchen knife. If you got those big kitchen knives, you know, they're good for cooking, they're good for cutting, but they're also good for stabbing. Whose other's hands was up?
Minya's back if you want Minya to read. Okay.
So nobody's really too convinced by this borrowing episode. You know, what can I say? We're now on the next page, on page 28.
Wait.
Yes, Marcia.
Marcia, you have to unmute.
I thought I did. I hit it twice, I guess. The box that says Hirsch on it, that is totally different from what we've been saying here now.
All right, let's read that if you like. And Marcia, you can read it and then we'll discuss it.
Jewish honesty. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch comments that the Israelites proved their sterling moral quality during the 3 days of darkness. For 3 days long, their oppressors were completely helpless in their power. For 3 days long, all their treasures lay open in their houses, and no Jew took the opportunity to take the slightest advantage either against their persons or their possessions. It's a comment.
Okay, so why do you think that's contrary to what we just read?
Because they're saying that they, at one point you're saying they borrowed the stuff or it was given to them. And then here it says they didn't touch it. It was just laying there and they didn't take anything.
Well, if you go back to the previous paragraph that Pam read, how does it explain that?
It says they were rewarded for just leaving, you know, basically.
Okay, so we're talking about different time periods, right? So we're talking, there's the 3 days of total darkness, and then there's the time afterwards.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so there's 2 different time periods.
2 different events. Okay.
So I can put Bernie's apartment in complete darkness, and I go in and I say, Bernie, are you okay? And I have my LED flashlight, and he says, yeah, but I can't move around because I'll trip because I can't see anything. I don't have a flashlight. I said, well, I can't leave you mine, but I just want to make sure you're okay. So then when the 3 days are end and the lights come back on, Bernie sees that everything in his house is still there. All of his artwork and jewelry and his wallet and his car keys. And I could have taken any of that. So then Bernie's so impressed, he then gives me all of that stuff. Says, take my car, take my because you were so honest and you didn't take it when you could have stolen it, I'm going to give it. Bernie's shaking his head. I don't know. So then if he doesn't agree, I'm going to put him in darkness another 3 days, and I'll then until he agrees. I don't know, you know, but what Hirsch says is very consistent with what the Talmud says. Marcia, so you agree with that now? Yeah, the idea is if you're nice and you prove that you
have
don't
to unmute different time periods then, right? Okay.
And then later, people are so impressed that they give it to you voluntarily afterwards. Okay, stop.
You know, I'm wondering, we're talking about roughly 400,000 people. And the 400,000 people must have some kind of a leadership. Now, where did all this gold and silver get to? Who ended up with all this stuff? I would imagine the leadership. And what did they do with it? That's really the question.
I think you're assuming that the Israelites were a lot more organized than they were. I mean, Sai, surely from knowing so many Jews over the years, how can you make such a naive statement?
Well,
I mean, Do you think that the Jews that you know are going to pool their jewelry and let some leader hold it for them, or even take it away from them? No, they're in the desert and they're each towing along their little black bags filled with jewelry and stuff, and maybe they've got a miniature vault with their stock option deals. And I mean, it doesn't portray the Israelites really that well. I mean, as you've suggested, it seems to suggest that they were little capitalists, even just coming out of Egypt as slaves. And I guess partly here we are talking about different economic systems. And clearly you could argue that this is an early text advocating for a form of capitalism, right? Okay, so we're on the top of page 28, left column. Pam.
I think the Jews were just practicing to become diamond merchants. You know, they start with gold and silver, and then they work their way up. That's my thought.
And I've been looking for a side gig, as you know, and I've tried a number of things without too much success. And I was hoping Bernie would give me all his jewelry and I could start peddling jewelry on eBay, but he won't do it. All right, Lorraine.
Yeah, okay. My sister lives in Virginia and they had that terrible snow this weekend. And she told me they had 12 inches and there was no power. And she never once mentioned that there was big reports of robberies when it was over and that people were stealing from people. Let me get rid of this. I think a person who is inclined to steal is going to steal no matter what the opportunities are. And either you have a mentality where you could take things that don't belong to you and you can rationalize it, or you would never even enter your sphere of thinking.
But clearly, if you have a propensity to steal, opportunity is important as well, right? So if everything's orderly and there's police walking around patrolling, you're less likely to do something because you see the police are walking around patrolling. If suddenly all the police disappear and your neighbors all, let's say, flee, if there's like a rumor of a poison gas attack and everybody drives off into Utah and all the houses are empty, then you can just walk in the front doors and steal. Aren't you more likely to do that?
Maybe some people would be.
Well, it's happening in big cities. They diminish the police in New York and Chicago and Los Angeles. So we know what happened.
Now, I'm talking about people who have a propensity to this sort of behavior anyway, but I suppose you could even argue a quote unquote normal person, you know, I'm not going to go stealing stuff, but if there's nobody's in town and houses are open and I see, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars in people's dressers, I don't know what I'm going to do. You know, so I guess there's a matter of if the temptation is great enough, you can sway some or many or most people. Okay, Riva, is that a hand? No, okay. Anyone else? Okay, back to you, Minya. Okay, Rochelle, and then back to Minya.
Just to go back real quick to what Sai said, you know, what did they do with it? It seemed like when they made the golden calf, as well as when they started to make the ark, it mentioned that the women were removing jewelry from their ears, from their, you know, from their fingers and from their necks. So I'm assuming that maybe a lot of these women actually kind of just draped themselves in it. Like maybe they actually just kept it on person, what they took themselves they had. But I do agree there probably was a central person that they took the gold and put it somewhere. and kept it. But it does mention that that happened.
So that means that the women put the earrings in their ears, and then when they're running in the Egyptians, you better hope that those things that hold it in the back don't fall off.
Yes. And that's just how it mentions it in the Torah. It just says, you know, when the calf, you know, the women began removing the jewelry, and as well as when they made the ark, you know, people began removing jewelry and things like that from their bodies and bringing whatever to, you know, make the gold ark and everything else. So.
No.
No, Marcia, why no?
Didn't it say that the women did not contribute the jewelry, the golden calf? The men, was the men that provided the gold?
Ah, okay.
And Rosh Chodesh came about because of that and all that?
All right, so there is a midrash that does say that, you know, that absolves the women of responsibility. And the main reason was that their earrings were being polished by the wholesalers, so they weren't there. So they, okay, that's a joke. All right, but yeah, there is a midrash about that. Okay, Dee or Ellen, comments before we go on, and then back to you, Minya.
If they were slaves, how could they have had jewelry and gold?
Yeah,
and
well,
silver?
And this is what this chapter addresses, and basically.
So it's a setup for the golden calf incident, huh?
It appears to be a literary setup for the golden calf, because you obviously can't have the Bible talking about them making a golden calf if there's no logical way that they got where the gold from. So therefore, they put in this in chapter 12 of Exodus, where it says I'll read you the words again. The Israelites had done Moses' bidding, and they borrowed from the Egyptian objects of silver and gold and clothing. And the Lord had disposed the Egyptians favorably toward the people, and they let them have the request. Thus, they stripped the Egyptians. So they had to put that in if they wanted the golden calf episode, and unless they wanted people like Ellen to say, where do they get all that gold from? Rochelle, and then Marcia.
No.
So,
okay.
So it says, then they stripped the Egyptians. When I hear that, I suddenly got this whole new thing in my head of all these people being forced to take their clothes off and stuff, give them their belongings so that the Hebrews could make it out of Egypt, and these naked people would not flee after them. That's what just happened in my head.
And that might very well be true, because one way to stop people to chase after you is make them, right in the movies, they do that all the time. They make you strip, and then they run away, and you can't really chase them.
Oh, great. I'm going to have that visualization all day now.
And what were those hats that the Egyptian wore? So you imagine all the Egyptians running after the Israelites with just the hats but no clothes. But the Israelites needed clothes, and right when people escape from prison, and they're wearing, in the movies anywhere, they're wearing the black and white striped jumpers. One of the first things they have to do is find clothes, because if they walk around the prison clothes, everybody will know who they are. So if there's a getaway driver, the getaway driver is instructed to bring clothes, and hopefully in the right size. Okay, Minya, back to you. We're at the top of page 28.
Josephus agrees. He claims that the Israelites did not steal anything. Instead, the Egyptians offered them gifts, insisting on honoring them out of friendship and neighborliness.
Okay, and you know who Josephus was. And so he's the major Jewish writer in the later Roman period. And, you know, he's very concerned with how the Romans and others are going to look at the Jews. So he doesn't want anyone saying the Israelites stole. So I don't think he's so concerned with what the Bible says literally here. He's going to interpret it in a favorable way. And he's going to say, no, the Egyptians offered them gift, insisting in honoring them because they were friends. And Rochelle said a long time ago that some of them were friends, right? Any group, you can't just say any group is this way or that way or the other way, right? We know that in America, when they say, you know, American Jews are this, well, obviously any of us know that whatever it is, it can't possibly be true because, you know, we've got 6 or 8 or 12 different groups that are totally, completely different. And within those groups, there's subgroups. But there were many friendly Egyptians, for some from the beginning, right? And so, so this is not completely preposterous. Comments? If not, then back to Minya.
Comments? No. Rashbam. Rashbam also believes that the Egyptians willingly turned over their wealth to the departing Israelites. They merely asked for it, and the Egyptians responded by giving them gifts. Rashbam implies that there was no force, no persuasion.
All right, you've had a rough time, and you have a neighbor in Sun City West, and you're going to run away, and you go to your neighbor, and you say, can I borrow $500 so I can escape? I'm not going to be able to return it, but, you know, I need it. And your neighbor, you've been really friendly for a long time. So he says, here's, take some clothes. Here's an extra can of Sprite. And here's $500 in cash. And just don't tell the police that I helped you. I mean, it's not inconceivable, right? I mean, B?
What bothers me is the word borrow. Doesn't that intone that if they're going to return it?
Right.
It bothers me. We keep using the word borrow.
Now we could translate it differently. The experts believe that that's the best translation, but I think in this case, maybe a less literal translation would serve us good. If we said if we changed that word to were given, the Israelites were given, instead of the Israelites borrowed, or the Israelites asked for a long-term loan that might turn into a gift if we can't get it back to you in time. Something like that. Rochelle, would that, but before going to Rochelle, B, would that help?
Well, I think that saying the Egyptians gave it to them is better than saying borrow, because borrow means you're going to return it.
All right. So, and as you saw from Josephus, we don't have to be wedded to the most literal translations, right? Just because a word in Hebrew meant something doesn't mean that's what it really meant. Rochelle.
And I just wanted to say as well, something that I was just thinking, the average Egyptian did not have jewels. So the Egyptians that they took these from probably were more higher class Egyptians. I just wanted to make that comment. And also as far as the borrow, to appreciate that, we can go back to where I said, maybe they told them that our God will see favor in you if you give this to us. So it's almost a borrow. You give us jewelry and then we'll give you something back. We'll give you the blessings of our God.
Yes. Pharaoh specifically asked for that in the section I read. He said, I'll let you go, take what you want, bless me. You know, he doesn't say it in a nice way like, you know, it's been so nice to know you guys, and you know, bless me in a friendly way. It's more like, I need your blessing because things are really going badly, and I think you have actual influence with God. So bless me. You know, it's like it's like a negotiating thing almost. But we know that in any society, there's going to be different groups that are more friendly and less friendly, and a lot of it's based on economics. So it's conceivable that the upper class Egyptians were friendlier towards the Israelites than the lower class Egyptians, right? So maybe many or most of the friendly Egyptians were upper class, so they were the ones that would have the jewels and would be willing to give it. They might say, but this poor group, these poor slaves, whereas the lower class Egyptians see the Israelites as economic competitors, and they're like, we want to, hurt these people. These are the people keeping us from becoming middle class because we have depressed wages due to all these slaves. So we don't like these Israelite slaves at all. So it's conceivable. Nan or Bill or Shirley or Jennifer or Dee. Any comments on this? Oh, yes, Dee.
Dee, you have to unmute.
Sorry. Listening and reading this and understanding what happened in the Exodus, I don't think there's any compensation enough to compensate over 600,000 Jews that were persecuted and tortured and slaves. And I mean, they were so degraded that their morality had to be so low when they were going on the Exodus. And to me, on the other paragraph, it's like they compare what happened in the Holocaust. I mean, all the millions that they stole from the Jews out of Germany doesn't compare to what happened to these people, the atrocities. And I guess, you can use economics as compensation, but I believe that it just absolutely destroys the morality. The whole, these people in this Exodus were going through such horrible torment upon their leaving. They must have been so confused at that point as to what was going on.
I can only imagine, I mean, none of us can conceptualize what it would mean to be a slave even for a few weeks.
Right.
Bill, is that a hand?
Not necessarily. We've heard a number of explanations. It's kind of hard to grasp that they could so easily take all this treasure out. I think the Bible was trying to justify that action by giving it the cloak of reparations, but I still kind of noodling over the whole concept of taking all that treasure.
Hold on 1 minute, please. Thank you. Hold on, please.
Okay, bye, Rochelle. Steve, comment? Oh, okay. Then back to Minya. So we've had Josephus and Rashbam, an ancient and then a medieval commentator, who both argued that the Egyptians gave willingly. Now we have a modern commentator, Nahum Sarna, who was a professor at Brandeis University, is going to argue the opposite.
Modern commentator Nahum Sarna disagrees. He explains that the silver and gold were not just neighborly gifts, but rather spoils of a justified Jewish victory over the Egyptians. For years, the Egyptians had treated the Israelites cruelly, insulting their dignity and intelligence as human beings. Taking gifts from the Egyptians was a means of restoring Jewish pride. It proved that Jews were equal in every way to their oppressors. The Israelites, Sarna writes, escaped from Egypt with their dignity intact. Sarna's explanation, however, differs from early Egyptian interpretations of the story. During the time that Alexander the Great ruled over Egypt, many Egyptians complained to him that the Israelites had stolen riches from their ancestors. As proof, they cited the Torah report of Jews taking silver and gold from the Egyptians. Hearing what some Egyptians were claiming, Gavia ben Pasisa, well-known Jewish leader, asked for a public debate, so Alexander agreed. After listening to the Egyptian argument from the Torah, Gavia answered, I will also use a proof from the Torah. We are told that Israel lived in Egypt 436 years. Do you Egyptians not owe the Israelites payment for all their years of slavery? After hearing Gavia's argument, Alexander gave the Egyptians 3 days to formulate an answer. They considered the matter, but could not find one. Gavia's argument that what the Israelites had taken was neither a gift nor stolen property, but rather reparations or repayment for years of slave labor is also one that other commentators have raised. For instance, the philosopher Philo Judaeus, who lived in Alexandria during the 1st century, believed that the silver and gold taken from the Israelites was a just payment to the Israelites for all their suffering and for the wages they had never been paid. The gifts were owed to the Israelites by the Egyptians.
Okay, stop. So this is now a third approach or a fourth approach, or that it's not that the Israelites stole anything, and it's not that the Israelites were given gifts, but that this was basically payment, reparations. Comments, does this, Philo is a very important ancient Jewish philosopher. As you know, I've talked about him before. Comments, does this strike you as feasible, reasonable, convincing? D, Babette, Marcia, Sai?
I don't think reparations is possible.
All right.
How can you replace what was forcibly taken for generations?
All right, but if you've been, if in this case you've been slaves there, and any compensation is not going to make up for it, but the Egyptians could still present you with a check and say, we know this may not make up, but here's a check. I mean, but your question is a broader one. Can reparations repair the moral and ethical harm that was done? And the answer I think that you're presenting is no, and I think we would agree with that without too much discussion. But here the question's much simpler. Was the money and the jewelry that the Israelites took with them, was it that they stole it? Was it they were given it? Or was it considered by the Egyptians anyway, reparations? The Egyptians,
it doesn't say steal. It doesn't say that they stole it.
No, it doesn't. And it doesn't say reparations, but we have to figure that out. All right, Marcia.
So I think Babette is absolutely right, but I think we're all arguing because that word borrow is making us a little crazy. I think that it's not a good definition for what they're telling you is actually happening. And you can't make up for it with money. You're not going to pay or wealth of any kind. But then again, if it was given as reparations, why should they not take it? And I'm going back on what I'm saying before, because I think that word borrow is what set me off to say they shouldn't have borrowed it. But if it was given as reparations and they're going off to a new land, why not take it and make their life a little easier? They're going to have to be trading when they're off in the desert to get stuff from other, travelers. as they go along. And so I think that then they shouldn't be condemned for taking it.
Okay, D and B.
Well, who's first? D. Anyway, what I think the problem here is they're using lots of words to justify stealing. I'm sorry, it may have been reparations, maybe they deserved it, but it was still stealing. And we're all going around that point, round and round, to make the Jews look good. I don't think that we can.
All right, but certainly Josephus, who lived in the first century with the Romans, he felt he needed to make the Jews look good, that there were anti-Semites already out there who were going to say bad things about the Jews. And his job as a writer was to polemicize a little bit. So if Josephus was here and you pressed him, and Beam would say to him, but you're just justifying something that can't be justified, he might shrug. And he said, well, that's kind of my job. You know, I'm here to try to present the Jews in a good light. And, you know, I don't want people to say Jews were stealing from the Egyptians because they already say enough bad stuff. So he might not push your point back. All right, D and then Sai and then Minya.
Well, I have a question. Somehow in the back of my mind, I remember reading that God had told Moses that they should take the gold and silver. Is that not in the Torah, Rabbi?
Yeah, well, right what I read, that it was considered to be okay.
Okay, so
but that doesn't make B feel that you know, she feels that's just covering up something, that it's not natural for the Egyptians to just turn over all their jewelry. Like D, if you you know, hit me a little bit on my bike and knock me off and I hurt my elbow a little bit, are you going to then just offer me all your jewelry just as a friendly gesture?
I certainly doubt that, but I.
All right. So if I end up with all your jewelry and I said, well, D gave it to me as compensation for hurting my elbow, you know, people might wonder whether if that was the exact circumstances. Okay, Sai and then Minya.
The question I have is, what is there that we have that will say that you are wrong for making us slaves? Okay, you let us go, and now that's the end of it. Now, what is the thing that's going to remind you that what you did was wrong, that we have today, other than giving something to us? What do we have? I think that's the problem.
Anybody want to answer that?
Babette, I wanted to get really to her.
All right.
I don't understand that. I'm sorry.
Sai, repeat your question in different words.
The question is, if there is no punishment of some sort, what is there for the people who did the bad things to be remembered that they did bad things? What do the Germans have to remember what they did to the Jews other than paying the reparations?
Well, we bombed Germany pretty good, didn't we? The Americans, we destroyed a lot of their cities, even though they kept the world's patrimony, not just Jewish patrimony, but their civilization, you know, their cities, major places were destroyed.
We did that during the war. Yep. That was a war thing rather than because of the Holocaust. We didn't destroy their cities because of the Holocaust.
No, we did it because of their aggression. Let's put it that way. I mean, if you believe what goes around comes around, but I don't know that it necessarily did that. But even today, some of the banks that had stored beautiful things, gorgeous paintings and stuff. They're still fighting to keep it. They're not returning it to the families who had documented that they had that stuff. It's even going on today.
Right. So, and this would have been true in the ancient world as well, that if you get something, you don't normally want to give it up, regardless of how you may have gotten it and the circumstances.
Like some of you, will travel to Germany. I mean, I'm certainly not going to, but we can never forgive what happened. Never.
Minya and then D.
I just want to go back to the word. I agree with the word borrowed in that it means that you're then going to return something. But there's a difference between that and stealing, which I don't understand why we're settling on the fact that the gold and silver was stolen. I think all this time we were talking about how it was given for different reasons. And then there's a totally different, to me, understanding of the word reparations compared to everything we've said about the Egyptians giving or gifting the gold and silver. Reparations is a repayment for something. And in case of Germany, they could never replace what was lost, the human lives and everything else. But for the people who went through it, reparations made it possible for them to start a new life. Because of reparations, they were able to go to whatever country they chose to live in and start anew, because they left with nothing after the war. If you remember, their homes, their clothes, their belongings, their families, everything was gone. So by the German government saying, here is some money that maybe will help you move forward, there's a difference in that kind of reparation than there is in what the Egyptians did with their gold and silver.
So if we reduce the payments that the Germans made, is not suggesting that it relieves them of moral responsibility for what was done.
No,
it's
it
simply
doesn't.
Money to help people and the state of Israel at the present and the future in the early 50s. Nobody's saying that because you're giving this money, it means that we aren't upset at what happened and that we don't hold individuals or groups or countries responsible for terrible deeds. But there were people in Israel who did not want to accept a penny from Germany because they said it's blood money, it's guilt money, by accepting it, you're saying, you're forgiving, you're forgetting, and maybe that would have been true in Egypt as well, that if the Egyptians did something so bad, then it's then maybe the proper response or the principled response is to leave the country without touching a single earring.
But by doing that, though, then they're leaving and starting or trying to start with nothing. So you're not, I don't think it ever takes away what happened to them, whether they were the Egyptian slaves or the Jews after World War II. It's not a moral thing. It's more here's some money so that you have something. If you leave with nothing, then you'll never move. How can you move forward?
And they're going as former slaves into the Sinai Desert. It's not like they're taking engineering training and going off to modern Tel Aviv to get a job with a high-tech company.
Or even to secretarial school.
Right. So they well, you could say they kind of needed it, but then later, as you see, they used most of it or all of it for the creation of the golden calf, which so maybe it wasn't such a good idea. Okay, who'd like to read? Where I was thinking of skipping the part about the reparations, but since there was so much discussion about it, let's read it and we can see what Harvey Field says about it. Steve.
I think we should read the box too, where it says just payment, because it
okay.
kind of defines what we're talking about.
Okay, Steve, you want to read the box?
Sure. The Hebrew slaves had worked for their masters. They were entitled to their freedom and, therefore, at the same time, to a just farewell payment. Justice demanded it.
And that's the Italian Jewish biblical commentator Umberto Cassuto. And he's talking about something in the book of Deuteronomy, but it relates to this right here. So do you agree? You agree with Cassuto that because the Hebrew slaves had worked for so long for the Egyptians, they were entitled to freedom, and they were also entitled to what is called here in English a just farewell payment, kind of like a severance package maybe is the modern term, right? If you quit your job or you get fired after a certain number of years, you can get a separation or golden, or if you're a CEO, you get a golden parachute, and if you're at a lower level, you get a compensation agreement. I don't know what it's called, but does this seem to be logical? Yes, Ellen.
It seems to suggest that this statement seems to suggest that it came as a lump sum, that it actually wasn't individuals giving up things, but a government making a payment.
Mm-hmm.
And every time they say Egyptians, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was like your guy next door, but it may have been like the elite, like the philanthropists.
So does that strike you as reasonable and appropriate? So it's not that everybody just went to their neighbors and went in their house and grabbed stuff. It's more like a group of the upper class leaders kind of put together a lump payment for the slaves and said, here's jewelry valued at whatever, $200,000 that is partial compensation for whatever they, Cassuto doesn't go in exactly what it is. He just calls it a just farewell payment. Is that compensation for the agony of being slaves? Is it just payment for the hours of work? It's not exactly clear what it is, but it's some sort of basic, end payment. And that I think strikes most of us today as reasonable because we're familiar with the concept in American economic life. Marcia?
I expect the latter, that, yeah, you're right in some ways, but I think it's almost here, take the money and leave town. I don't think it was done with any moral justice, so to speak.
Okay, who'd like to read about the reparations starting in 1951? Pam? Bottom page 28 in the right-hand corner.
In 1951, the government of Israel debated the question of whether or not to seek reparations from Germany. 6 million Jews had been killed by the Nazis. Jewish-owned businesses and properties worth millions of dollars had been confiscated or destroyed. Careers were ruined. Hundreds of thousands were left sick, homeless, or orphaned. David Ben-Gurion, then Prime Minister of Israel, argued that while the losses could never be fully calculated, the state of Israel was justified in seeking $1.5 billion from Germany as material reparations. The money would be used to secure compensation, indemnification for the heirs of the victims, and rehabilitation of the survivors. By January 1952, Jews throughout the world, but especially in Israel, were locked in heated debate as to whether such reparation should be either requested or accepted. Ben-Gurion explained that the amount of 1.5 billion had been chosen because it was the minimal sum required for the absorption and rehabilitation of 500,000 immigrants from countries subjected to the Nazi regime. Menachem Begin, then head of the opposition Hurriyet party, objected, claiming that the acceptance of reparations would mean a surrender of political independence and would represent the ultimate abomination of those who've been murdered by the Nazis. After a month of protests against the government proposal, the Knesset voted 61 to 50 to accept reparations. The payments were spread over a 12-year period. David Ben-Gurion, Israel, A Personal History, Funken Wagner, Were these reparations from Germany to the Jewish people after the Holocaust a parallel to the gifts of silver and gold that the Israelites took from the Egyptians? Should victims or their children accept payment for such cruelty? Can a price be placed on human life or on 6 million human lives?
Okay. Those are good questions that Pam is asking. So you see the reparations only passed by a relatively narrow margin, 61 to 50. There were many people that thought that this was compounding the complete humiliation that had been experienced, and that they didn't want any of the German money. And of course, as I said, the people paying the money are very different people than the people that had done the crimes. Okay, comments. Comments about the reparations, and then comments about comparing the two situations. Pam.
I can see why it was controversial, because how do you put a price tag on what happened to the Jewish people during the Holocaust? I mean, I can see why it was controversial, but I think I voted for the reparations in the end.
The money was not labeled for the suffering or the financial loss. It was what Israel needed for the minimal absorption of the Holocaust refugees. So they said there were 500,000 Holocaust refugees. 1.5 billion would, be the amount needed to just sort of, minimally absorb them and, teach them Hebrew and give them a place to live for 6 months and so forth.
Don't you think it was a little of both, though? Don't you think in some people's minds it was, I don't know.
Yeah, well, and it did not absolve other claims. So if you'd lost a factory or whatever, you could still claim for that separately. Sai.
I think it's interesting that the government of Germany paid the reparations to Israel, whereas in the case of the Bible, supposedly individual Egyptians were giving individual Hebrews money. And that's the part that I don't get.
Right, and that's what Ellen suggested about 5 or 10 minutes ago, that maybe it really wasn't individual Egyptians. Maybe it was a group of the upper class Egyptians kind of working together like the German government and saying, we're gonna come up with a bunch of jewelry, we're gonna all just give in a bunch of our jewelry and stuff, and we'll come up to whatever $200,000 worth of stuff or whatever it was, and we'll present this. So, because if it's individuals, it becomes more problematic. Now, of course, it depends how much you want to, interpret this figuratively. We don't have to stick with the literal text of the Bible. As you know, we can get very midrashic and say that our view, this probably happened, or we'd like to believe this is what happened, even if that's not what the words actually say exactly. Comments?
Is midrashic a real word?
Midrash is a real word. Lidrosh is the verb in Hebrew. Lidrosh means to sermonize. A midrash is a story, a rabbinic story based on the Bible, but not exactly the Bible. Midrashic is the adjective. Modern midrash is what we would do if we rewrite everything now. And modern midrash is perfectly legitimate, to the extent that that we see it as legitimate. So, so we're going to make a committee of 3 to write a modern midrash about this story, and we're going to present it to the entire congregation this Friday. Any final thoughts or comments, Reva?
Yeah, I think any transfer of substantial wealth from one group of people to another group of people is very problematic. And in this story, in the first paragraph, when we started this Parak Aleph, it says that God was told the Israelites to borrow each man from his neighbor and each woman from hers, objects of silver and gold. And I know in societies where there aren't banks, or many people don't have access to banks, people wear their wealth. It's very, very common for, even among poor people, like in India, people wear whatever wealth they have, they put it into gold and they wear it on their body. So there's something very personal about this kind of wealth that we're talking about here. One thing in particular that disturbs me is that this story was used at other times, and they give the example of with the Egyptians, that this became used for as a source of anti-Semitism. The Jews were taking something from other people. And I find that particular element of the story, I find particularly troubling, because anti-Semitism has gone along for a very long period of time, and very often it was related to the Jews harming or stealing from some other group of people.
And there's no real solution to that, because people will claim, and no group is perfect, and there's plenty of stuff that everybody does, but I guess what classifies anti-Semitism is you go beyond just blaming Jews for one specific incident in one specific way, and then saying, oh, all the Jews are bad all the time. Look at this, and this, and you start exaggerating the bad and ignoring the good and ignoring the diversity. So it's a difficult thing. Babette.
Well, I have a question, really. 1.5 billion was taken from Germany, but I don't know if that hurt the German people individually. Where did all that confiscation of property and businesses go? Was that a hardship on the German government, or were they?
No, I don't think so. Post-war Germany was quite a growing, affluent country, and I think it was Prime Minister Adenauer of Germany that wanted to do this wanted to help Israel. So they didn't really have foreign aid in Germany after World War II, because they were supposedly just being reconstructed themselves under the Marshall Plan.
But did it hurt them? Did it hurt them? No.
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 I don't think it was designed to hurt them. I mean, Morgenthau had a plan to really hurt the Germans after World War II, to punish them. And, the American government decided very much against that, and they wanted to rehabilitate Germany and make them as affluent and successful as possible, as quickly as possible, so that it wouldn't happen again. And it pretty much worked. But the downside of that is, that very few, even very hardcore Nazis, were barely punished. I mean, outside.
And we had a president who was anti-Semitic. Roosevelt was certainly no friend to Jews.
All right, well, but Roosevelt didn't directly kill any Jews. I mean, indirectly, it turned out he killed a lot of Jews, but
he denied it was happening. He didn't recognize it. He didn't.
Right, well, that's all that is true. To what degree he's culpable is a very difficult thing to appraise. Remember, this is a different era. People were much more prejudiced toward many groups, and so Roosevelt was not alone. It was and Roosevelt felt that he was fighting his primary and exclusive focus had to be to fight the war against the Nazis, and he couldn't get distracted by other issues that were not going to lead to I'm not defending him at all, but it's complicated, and the historians in the last 10, 15 years have argued back and forth, how culpable he is.
Well, Eleanor Roosevelt understood what was going on. She whispered in her husband's ear.
Right. And, yeah. So the question is, did Roosevelt sit down and say, I want to have a lot of Jews killed? I don't think so.
He turned back the boat.
Well, yeah, that's true.
He certainly did, and he knew it was to their death.
Well, probably, yes. So, yes, I mean, I'm not defending Roosevelt. Babette has battered me into submission here.
No, that's not
but the truth is that unfortunately Roosevelt comes off very poorly the more that is revealed about this. But I'm just trying to look at it from his perspective. He was a typical American of that generation. In other words, he didn't have a lot of sympathy for Jews. He did hire some very high-ranking Jews. So like many people, he was more anti-Semitic in theory than in practice. So if you had a good candidate to be secretary of whatever who was Jewish, Roosevelt might hire them. But when you had talks about the Jews in foreign countries who were suffering, Roosevelt was not too sympathetic, to put it mildly. That didn't make him that unusual for that time period, Well,
it was also the New York Times who refused to publish what they knew that was going on in the camps.
And that was a Jewish-owned company. So, all right. But anyway, concluding back to the original case of the Egyptians, it's interesting to what degree the Holocaust and the Egyptian slavery, I would have avoided the comparison, but Harvey Fields did not, so we did not. But there are obvious parallels, and particularly in the issue of reparations. Final word, and then over to Steve Tsai.
I was going to say that having fought in the war, I think that Roosevelt was one of the great people that made the war possible, that we were able to win, in spite of all the other problems that we faced.
And that's what I was trying to say to Babette. I mean, I agree with Babette, the truth is. But if you look back at the 1930s and Lindbergh and Henry Ford, and I mean, Roosevelt, and Roosevelt's own background, which was just, slightly anti-Semitic, as many or most people of his background were. I'm not sure that you could have expected him to do that much more. But, now if Eleanor Roosevelt had been president, clearly she would have done more. I mean, the position of president at that time required somebody with a different mindset. So I agree with her, but I also agree with you. Okay, back to Steve for any final words, and then final prayer, and then I'll see you very soon. And
okay, sorry. Go ahead, Rabbi.
No, it's okay. Over to you, Steve.
Okay. First of all, Riva, do you have any announcements or anything that you need to say before we conclude?
I hope everybody's received the message that the lunch today will not be taking place, but it will be scheduled in the future.
Okay.
And thank you, all of you, for responding so nicely. We would have had a wonderful time. I'm sorry we couldn't go out together today.
Very good. All right, let us conclude with the final blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah.
Amen. V'chayei olam nata b'tochenu.
Baruch
Baruch
atah
atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Blessed is Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who has given us a teaching of truth, implanting within us eternal life. Blessed is Adonai, giver of the Torah. Amen.
Amen.
Have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Yes, Bernie.
Be safe and healthy.
Yes, safe and healthy.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.